Recording in progress. Welcome to Conversations with Calvin, We the Species. And I want to do a little monologue and talk about J.J. Lair, who's my guest today, because this is really special to me. In an interview in J.J. Lair, and J.J. Lair and I met a bunch of years ago, 15, 16, 17 years ago, give or take. And what's really interesting about this, my meeting J.J. Lair is part of a writing critique group that I had joined after I published my first novel. But and we've been talking for a long time now before we went on air. But that group and the people in that group were part of the greatest change in my life. And I had met, of course, JJ and John and Dolores, and by being part of that group, Dolores, a member of that writers critique group, it sent me an email that she saw that a magazine here in Central Jersey was looking for a journalist. I was not a journalist, but it sparked something, and I answered the ad, and I became a journalist, and my whole life changed around. And that's why we're here today, because of that writing group. That and you never know when something lands in your lap like that. It landed in my lap, and I just kind of went with the flow. And so that's how precious JJ that group was to me, because uh, my whole life, everything I've done, even writing my second novel, I don't mind promoting it because we're both self-published guys here. There's a tortoise in my hair. All of that, uh, all of this, everything that's gone on in my life stems from that writing group that we were in together. So that's how important and special my interviewing you is, uh, 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 paying homage to that writing group. So, J.J. Lair, an author in your own right. I'm holding up some of the stuff that you've done. This is out now. And another, you're going to talk about it. So, I'm done with my monologue. How about doing a little bio and intro, and then we're going to jump into a lot of stuff about self-publishing, because 300,000 people who self-publish a year need help, and you're going to give them help. Take it away,
Well,
JJ.
thank you for having me on. Yeah, I'm so happy that that we can have this conversation and be here because you are like one of those success stories from that group. I mean, we were just a bunch of people that had some stories or ideas, and some people were able to bring them to fruition. Some people just stopped going to writers groups after a while, and I still follow you after all these years because yeah, you're somebody who made it into you kept it going and made it into something. Several people over the years, yeah, eventually finished. They did the one and done. They were happy, yay. And other people I see from time to time are still out promoting, or not everybody needs to be a novel writer. Some people actually got inspired and then went into a totally different field of writing and creativity and editing, and that's a beautiful thing too. Yeah, we kind of met same thing. I had a story. Uh, I had the Dear Pen Pal, and I was just going to go to this group and just see what happens. Maybe talk up the book a little bit. And instead, I found all these people with different opinions and different genres and different stories. And yeah, I had a good time with that group too. I was there till I was one of the last people that till that group finally had to call it.
How did you way back? How did you find that group? Um,
So back then, yeah, libraries have, I guess every library has a community affairs person or relations person. And this library had, so I know two people started the group. They were local and they went to the library, and the librarian put it in their monthly newsletter. And I follow all these local libraries and their newsletters. And I said, oh, well, here's something I could get into and go check it out. at the same time, I think some bookstores weren't doing as much community relations anymore, and libraries were picking up that slack. So I was following where a lot of libraries were going, or at one time I was like part of six different groups. So
Wow.
you hear about one, you hear about another, like, oh, hey, there's this other group I know of over here. And that's how I had heard about it, just from networking and just
Okay.
following what's going on in current events.
Okay. Do you still do writing critique groups these days?
I am still part of at least two, yes,
Okay.
different areas and a little bit of traveling to do that, but still great for networking. Even when I have nothing to read on my own, I get to hear what other people are doing.
Okay.
I get to hear ideas that actually, oh, okay, now I'm inspired again. So even if I have nothing, to go to such a group and meet such people is always beneficial for me.
Okay. Okay. Our bonding. I talked. I went off. I talked a bunch. I wanted to give you my background. But you and I are bonded by a very strong particulate of energy, and that's we're both self-published. So some of the energy of this interview was going to talk about self-publishing because there are 300,000 self-published people a year or something like that. I think I'm right, but that's a lot of people who go through the journeys of self-publishing. When you started out, I'm always curious. You started out self-publishing in the 90s. What was it like back then? Uh,
There, if there was information out there, it was not easy to find. We had the internet, but not a lot of people had the internet. At one time in the '90s, you can go to Manhattan to an internet cafe where you rented a computer for an hour to go on the internet.
wow.
So when I started, there were sites, but nobody really knew how to find them or to use them. Writer's Digest was still out, and they took advertising, as a bunch of other magazines did too, from different writing schools, places, editors, and things like that. So that was basically a source of how I was able to start. And so, uh, so when I did, I wanted to be some kind of storyteller writer when I was a kid, but I didn't know how because there wasn't a lot of the information we have now so readily. If it was there, I didn't know how to find it. So I started writing this story and I thought it was pretty good. There was one book called The Writer's Market Guide to Editors and Publishers. Yeah, thing was about as big as I'm holding this. And I was updated every year and I went through that trying to find what to do next. And if you're not in that field, I mean, you send out a letter, but you don't know if it's any good or anything like that. They didn't. I took some writing courses and things like that. I did okay with them, so they said it was okay. So, and I went to those magazines, and in the back there would be, "We'll publish your stories. We'll help you edit. We'll help you market. We'll do all this." I didn't know at the time that that was kind of a down thing. They called it vanity publishing at the time. Those companies called it subsidiary.
Right. Right.
They said, you pay part, but we're going to do all this extra, and we're going to take some of this cost on too. But in reality, probably not. Uh, so I was like, okay, well, I didn't know better. So I'm like, all right, well, let's look into this company. And it had been around for years. There were a few companies that had been around for years because for decades, nobody knew if what that secret was of being a published author meant if you had a story or something like that. So I looked into this company and they had some published books and I read the contract and the contract said everything sounded fair about it. Uh, what's what's interesting is the problem was at the time, and I didn't know this. They say, okay, and what we'll do is we'll design the cover for you, but you'll take your ideas, and they did. They did a nice cover. In fairness, they said we publish as trade paperbacks, and in the '90s, trade paperbacks were starting to become a thing. Um, Oprah had her seal on a lot of trade paperback books. So I was like, all right, well, I guess that's becoming the thing. And the price they told me it would that they would the price for the book was about comparable to others. I said, all right, sounds like a pretty good deal. I'm going to do this. Um, but what they were charging in the stores for these trade paperbacks is for like a 300-page book, and my book came out to be about 100. So after about a year and change of, and in fairness to them, I sent them edits. They looked at them. I emailed with. We didn't have email. I had to do this over the regular mail to contact my editor.
Wow.
Uh, Actually, I think her name was Rachel. That's how many times I mailed her.
Wow.
Uh, but back then, that's what we did. We did through mail. We sent big. They had a manuscript box. It was like the size of a shirt box kind of thing that we constantly went and mailed back and forth to each other. And yeah, my book came out to be about 140 pages. So that price was not really competitive, but I had the books. They eventually they kept them in their warehouse. I didn't have to store them unless I wanted to buy them. Smaller bookstores, again, they knew that there was Baker and Taylor as a distributor. There was Ingram,
Right.
but if for smaller people and smaller companies, you went into the store, directly talked to the owner or something, and said, "I have a book," and a lot of times I was able to get into a store just by doing that.
Wow.
That was a lot of travel too.
Wow.
But yeah, overall, there was in the nine and when I started in the 1990s and almost into 2000, yeah, there wasn't a lot of people that fully got all that information. Even finding editors to help me edit, was a lot of time to try to find them. Whereas today, there are several sites you can go to.
Okay. All right. So of course these um um are they good? I have such a stereotypical negative view of these subsidiary vanity publishing. I never went that way. Are there still some good companies around today that um vanity and subsidiary publishing companies that publish you? And that's part of the question. The other and I'm trying to develop this. So my theory, my own, and again, I have limited experience in this, but if Simon and Schuster were to publish me today, they'd say to me, "We're going to publish you. Of course, you have to wait 3 years for us to publish you to get you into and get you into the schedule. But you're not Stephen King, and nobody knows you, so you're going to have to market it yourself." And that to me was a real turnoff. I said, "Well, what do I need them for? The prestige, the prestige of having Simon and Schuster on my book. If I'm going to have to market it myself, Uh, uh, is that a valid point? Uh, does that has that turned you off to traditional publishing?
In recent years, I was talking to a lot of people who did have these multi-book contracts and who were assigned to bigger publishers. And they said, yeah, when their contracts were done, they were just going to buy the right back to the book and they were just going to do it themselves because, yeah, they would be somewheres and they'd sell a book. And then basically that seller would have to send an invoice to the publisher who would have to send it to their accounting. And yeah, like a year later, then they actually see the royalty for that time that they stood for an hour on a Saturday
Wow,
or multiple hours on a Saturday.
wow,
So there's a lot of people now who do kind of do this mix of both, where if they can get a publisher, because hey, if they'll take care of the cover and maybe some distribution for me, hey, that's good, more time for me. But in the end, a lot of them are like, then I'm just going to buy it back, and then I'm going to do my own thing anyway. They have websites and they have their list of friends who are probably cover creators now they've met over the years. They do it now themselves. Uh, those companies are still there. I occasionally on Writer's Digest, when they do their best self-published contest, I do see those company names pop up. So I know POD publishing, printing on demand, has majorly reduced the costs. And now, since everybody's involved in this, the quality has to go up so much more. There was a time where now I can see it. I can see when somebody did something self published way back when, but now there are some covers that are really nice and some really good authors that you'd never know the difference until maybe you flip in the back and you go, okay, wait, publishing company by, same name.
Do you have just off the top of my head, do you have like favorite self-published authors?
Oh yeah, I mean, so there's another podcaster, Brian Cohen, who does the Sell More Books podcast. He had his Ted Saves the World series. That's how I discovered him.
Uh-huh.
Um, Jenna Marisi has the Savior's Conquest, which is a big fantasy series. I really like. She also has a video. She sends out videos every once in a while. Um, there's this guy Michael Ventrella who writes about music, and he had one book about the law that was really good, and I passed that around to a lot of people. And yet, again, the covers, the formatting, the binding, everything was so well done. Nobody'd know the difference.
Okay. Um, I'm trying to compare Simon and Schuster traditional and self-publishing, of which you and I are both self-published. Uh, is there negativity to self-publishing, uh, um, as opposed to traditional? Uh,
I've been on panels where, yeah, they basically said the negativity right to me. Because at the time, it it was seen that if you're self-publishing, that means you don't want to go through the gatekeepers because you have an ego or a frail ego, or you don't want to go through these gatekeepers because you don't want to take the time to learn the craft, whatever. And nowadays, no, there's just the avenues for the traditional are smaller. I think at one time there may have been like 10 big publishers. We're down to what, three or five. A lot of smaller companies, they have a harder time with their distribution. But then there's more smaller companies that were able to open up now that there's new avenues in print on demand, ebooks. So, and as I said before, there's just some people who for years had contracts and just said, I know all this already. Why don't I just do this for me? Uh, the self-publishing though is a very, very wide area though. I mean, on one level, you have the person who just wants to write their book and maybe sell a few, but it's for friends and family. And then you do have your professional, um, Brian Cohen's, Jenna Marisi's, and Nicole Zoltak's and everything who have series out. And we all seem to get lumped. And that's it's a shame because there's also a statistic that self-published books sell less than 100 copies. Well, I mean, if you're like an A.R. Torrey who does both, and she can sell thousands of her old title, her back catalog by self-publishing, and you're in the same category as the person who did the few books just to get it out, it kind of skews all the opinions of what's possible. But I think in recent years, now because of the opportunities, both for self-publishing and to do a better job of it, and the traditional publishing doors aren't what they used to be, I think the image has changed. I have talked to people who I really thought were going to give me this negative opinion who said, no, I would totally self-publish today if I could.
wow.
Yeah.
Wow. It's funny. I've self-published twice, and this got a Kirkus star, and three-quarters of the books that Simon and Schuster published don't have a Kirkus star. So I'm really and it's funny, when I got the Kirkus star, I said to myself, well, I started to do query letters again. I didn't tell you that before we went on air. So I figure, well, now that I've proved that this is something, let me see if I can get an agent and do it traditionally. So it's actually kind of comical. So I sent out three query letters and trying to inform them that I have a Kirkus star. And I stopped. I said to myself, why do I want to do this? That the negativity with trying to find an agent and everything now is so impersonal. They agents use AI. They use AI, and you send them a chapter, and they stick it into AI, and if it's what they want, and if there's mistakes or this or that, so it's even less personal. Um, um, but I'm committed, like you are, JJ, to the whole institution of self-publishing, and I told you stories, and maybe I'm become because I'm a retired guy. I have a lot of time uh, to experiment with stuff, and I've been experimenting and learning, and I shared, some of that stuff with you. But I was truly excited about this interview because yours we are brothers, and being that we're self-published in everything we've experienced. Um, um, Now let's move on to some specifics. Your latest book. Let's talk about your latest book. Is that Murder in the Mirror?
Yes,
Which I'm gonna hold up.
I would do.
Okay, Murder in the Mirror. Um, uh, it's a paranormal story. So did you in trying to come up with this, did you had to do a lot of extensive research in paranormal stuff?
Yes. So well, I was already kind of into it. Otherwise, I probably wouldn't have had the idea for the story. But it was, yeah, even the research was kind of fun. I mean, I got to read Amy Bruni's book, Steve Gonsalves, a lot of the ghost hunters stories, a lot of their work, what they did. I've looked up things on the internet. I even include some of that actually in the story when he's trying to figure out what's going on with this mirror. I decided, I'm going to incorporate it in there. So I do mention John Zaftis and his museum in Connecticut. Uh, I think I even have a part there about the Warrens too. They were big on this paranormal thing, and so it's such paranormal is such a huge genre that you can go anywhere with. There's romance, there's mysteries, there's scary, there's funny, there's so many options you can read about. And I was to get into it and how people think and what will trigger what. There were so many things I could read, and again, there's so much out there now that's so much better now that yeah, you
Okay.
can find so much information. And yeah, that turned out to be a lot of fun. There are conventions now. I know there are a few coming up, probably this time of year, where yeah, there's people that go to these. And Chip Coffey is going to be in one in New Jersey soon. He's a paranormal explorer,
Uh-huh.
so there is a lot of information out there, and there was a lot of the fun. It was just in writing. It was like, okay, I have all this information. I'd love to share it with everybody. Some of it I used, some of it, okay, I helped to make my characters.
You know, I hinted at I've done as a journalist 6 paranormal investigations. Maybe when we're done, I'm not going to talk about it now, but it is fascinating, and it's real. I mean, I lived it, and I lived it, and some of the stuff was funny, and some was not funny. Well, but this takes place in Atlanta County. Um,
Yes.
why Atlanta County as opposed to right up here close to home?
I just thought there was so much history there that I could have taken all of these different avenues with. I mean, you have from the colonial times and the Native American tribes that lived there, and there's burial grounds still there. You have the whole resort area of the 1930s and Boardwalk Empire, and you have
Uh-huh.
your starting to fall apart resort of the 1960s, which is a little outdated. You have your gambling era, and even there. Hey, I could look into Boardwalk Empire. I could. There was a book called Missing You in Atlantic City by Jane Kelly. I liked reading. So there was, and I lived there for a while too.
Uh-huh.
So the old hotels uh, that they took down and built up. There's a lot of history in Atlantic County, and not everybody has to work in gambling. There's also a lot of other industry there. So there was a world of opportunities there.
Okay.
And I like writing about people that have they're basically just people like me. I don't really write about like police or doctors or anything. It's not really my field. So areas where an average person can trip into a lot of history or a circumstance, that's interesting to me.
Was this your first uh was this your first book on paranormal?
It was, yes.
Okay, okay. Um uh yeah, not my book is one of the categories is spiritual. And there's not that much at least in my opinion, difference between paranormal and spiritual. The kind of metaphysical. I don't know what the official title is, but how come you did change genres to go from what you've been doing, what you've been doing, stuff you've been doing, and now you went into paranormal. Um, why?
Basically, all the stories, regardless of genre, is always basically I have the same kind of characters. They're just one's a truck driver. I have teenagers that are not making that are not on sports or anything like that. They're just trying to get through the day. And here I had a character who just bought a mirror at an estate sale. He works at a chain sandwich making place. So it was another average guy that could fall into an area, and there was just so many opportunities I could go here and stuff that I was already interested in. So I
Okay,
was like, wait, why not just do that?
okay.
Uh, I mean, I I know they say you really shouldn't just go changing genres. It sounds like you don't know what you're doing or you're just guessing. But I mean, then I look. One of my favorite authors is Lisa Jewell, and she went from writing what they used to call chick lit, like Vincent Joy or 30 Nothings, into now she's like one of these accomplished mystery writers. And when they asked her about it, she said, all I really did was just take the same characters, but now they're not funny. They're in a mystery. And that's what I want. That's what I basically did here. And I think there's a lot of opportunities for people to just be in these circumstances that where they have to learn something too and be part of a different type of world.
Um, we talked about this before we went on air. This is self-published, but it almost wasn't, correct?
Yes. As I was saying earlier, this actually I had it. I did go to a lot of developmental editors, professional editors. I had beta readers, and then I said, I'm going to try to do the traditional publishing. I really want to free up some time to do other stories and try to self-publish because self-publishing can be really time-consuming. Books and formatting and covers and everything. So I through all these writers groups that are out there and these magazines, I had a small publisher, and they took it, they accepted it, and we would through one round of editing, talked about ideas for a cover, and then they got bought out.
Oh,
And the new owner had said that he wanted to focus on some more family friendly type titles and maybe wholesome stories. And the beginning of chapter 2 does not fit that. Chapter 13 would not fit in that.
wow.
So it got the contract got canceled.
Oh,
And even though I know this is America, companies get bought out all the time, mergers, and I understand it happened to a lot of writers where friends of mine, their publisher went out of business like right after they got published, and suddenly they had no book. I've heard the stories, but I still felt bad, like, oh, why'd I get canceled? So for like the next weekend or so, I kind of sulked around about that. And I went to go and I talked to some of my friends on the internet. I went to go see some who were at a book fair, and they were like, "Well, then what do you could self-publish it then? You've already clearly know you've been edited. You already clearly have all the rest." So, and I said, "Well, yeah, but everybody wants to be traditionally published and all and everything." And they're like, "You've basically done it all, and this is what happens: they get bought out, and you get left behind." Or yeah, you get paid your royalties 2 years down the road or whatever. You already have, you already know people. You've already been looked into this. You've already had experience. You already know what company not to do. Why don't you just think about finishing it? And I was like, oh yeah, you know what? I'm going to take it to the finish line. And again, from those people, I had to go find places like, so do I do my cover through Fiverr, where all those artists are? Selfpubcovers.com. I looked at, I know a lot of people are using Canva, but my understanding is there might be copyright issues you got to be careful of. So I didn't really play with that. So I was like, all right, you know, yeah, I do know what to do. I decided I'm just going to take it to the finish line myself. And I've been the one that's been trying to get into stores. I'm the one who's been going to the book fairs, and which is what I was going to do anyway under this company anyway.
Interesting. By the way, when we met a few weeks ago, re-met, that was my first, in the year that this been published, that was my first exposure outside of my office here. I had never done that. And the reason being, and I was friendly with Carol Selleck. We met and we become friends, and she's self-published and she's a singer and she's written some books, and she was there and she nudged me to to do that. She said basically, and I have a rule, if it's one traffic light or less, I'll go. So going to Manalapan Library was one traffic light. So I went. It was a silly rule. But that was my first it was my first experience. Uh I've been semi-reluctant to do the kind of stuff that you've been doing, only because I was in sales. I was in eyeglass sales for 25 years. And I spent 25 years calling on, opticians and optometrists, trying to get them to buy. And the thought of going into a bookstore and trying to get them to buy, it's like I paid my dues. So,
Well, I'll tell you the truth. I am a bit of an, you probably saw it that day. I am a bit of an introvert. I am not one to start the conversation. Well, maybe I'll start depending, but I'm not very good at the conversation one on one. But I really like my story. I'm happy to talk about it. And basically, that's how I kind of get through the sales thing and talking about it.
okay.
Uh, yeah, one of the people, maybe in the next stable for me, yeah, she had a rule. She had a 4 hour rule. She'd go anywhere within 4 hours of her house to promote.
That's funny.
So it's not easy. And
No
but I
way.
mean, if you like your book here and you like what you're doing, people are great.
Yeah,
Other writers, even if they're traditionally published and they may not like you for this, they're still going to share a table with you and talk. It's
right.
still a great experience.
Right. No, listen, I thoroughly enjoyed, and I missed, it's funny, I haven't been selling eyeglasses in 12, 13, 14 years, and I kind of missed that a bit. And by the way, I was a huge introvert a bunch of years ago. Huge. I couldn't talk to anybody. And then when I got thrown into the thing in order to survive, when I left pharmacy, in order to survive and support my wife and my family, I had to talk to people and get them to buy my eyeglasses. So I started to lose that introverted stuff. Um, Another question, JJ. It's kind of expensive uh, to self-publish, isn't it?
Can be.
Can
Uh,
be.
but then it's your book and your wallet. I mean, there are free templates, even through Kindle Direct Publishing. They have a free template to format a book. They even have templates for book covers, but the thing is, it kind of shows. Or flip side of that, yeah, there are editors that charge per hour. There's editors that charge per word, depending on. But then there's also editors that are just a couple $100 if you need developmental ideas or something. Uh, but yeah, I've met people over the years who, yes, have spent thousands, and I've also seen people who just wanted to do their one and done and trusted their friends as to help them edit, or knew teachers and English teachers and had them help out. Um, that's publishing too, but then the next step, that marketing thing. I mean, as we were just saying, yeah, that 4 hour drive is probably costly too if you're going to factor that, all the conferences. If you do want to traditionally publish, also, if you want to do all that, you'd have to do all that on top of it. And also, the editor pitch conferences and stuff can add up. So it's as much as you can afford. There are options either way,
Yep.
depending on how much you can do.
Yep. I haven't gone to that. Like I said, meeting you at the library, that was my first time out of the house ever in my journey. Before we continue, I love to go off topic as part of my journalism, and I always like to ask a couple of questions that I got from a very good journalist. And actually, you don't have to answer it. You can, you don't. So here goes.
Okay.
Uh, Excluding family or friends, somebody living or dead you like to spend a day with.
So I live in Monmouth County. Believe it or not, I'm probably one of the few people in Monmouth County who has not accidentally met Bruce Springsteen.
Ah,
Supposedly, he's been within a quarter mile of me, and I have never actually met him. And
wow.
everybody in the area I know, it's like, oh yeah, I met him years ago. Oh yeah, he was at that ice cream place. You missed it, huh? Oh yeah, he used to go here. And I'm like, he was in the library one time, and I'm like, am I the only one? So there would be that.
I like that. I like that answer. I'm very fortunate because some years ago I joined the gym. Um, my first day at the gym, I'm on the abductor machine, working my thighs here, and there was a machine next to me about 1 foot away, and it was so surreal. I turned to look, and there's Bruce Springsteen sitting, 1 foot away from me. But you don't process that. As it turned out, that was his gym. That was my now new gym, and I was very fortunate because Bruce and I were on the same Monday, Wednesday, Friday when he wasn't on tour, which most of the time he's not on tour. But anyway, his schedule was my schedule, so I saw Bruce 3 days a week, at least an hour a clip, for 2 years. But however, that's his world, and my world is my world, and I wouldn't infiltrate his world, so I didn't do any of the selfies or any of that BS. One Christmas, one Christmas I bumped into him and hey Bruce, Merry Christmas, and but I did actually. This is kind of funny. Right, it was right before the pandemic, and I had a new trainer, and I was walking with her, and she was taking me to a machine, and of course now I'm seeing him, 3 times a week for 2 years, so he kind of knows me, and I know him, and visually, and he went like that to me, and so I went like that to him, and then he broke the rules. So he must have known my trainer. So he came over while she put me on a machine. I'm doing that, and he came over to BS with her. And it's funny. He broke the rules. He entered my world. So when he finished and he hugged her and he started to walk away, I yelled, "Hey, Bruce, stop!" When he stopped, I said, and it's funny. I just read his bio. and there was a half a chapter devoted to his favorite horse in the world that he boards and lives with him on his, his ranch. And the horse's name was Cal in this book and in real life. That's my name. So
Yeah.
I told him, I read your bio, I loved it. I said, your favorite horse is Cal. And he said, yeah. I said, well, that's my name. He got hysterical laughing, came over, we shook hands. And here's the killer, JJ. That was such a great intro. The killer was the following week, pandemic hit and closed everything. So I couldn't perpetuate that that maybe that
Yeah.
friendship. I don't know. So it ended and there was no more Jim. And it's too bad because that was such a great tie-in and he would have remembered me because Cal and the horse and but anyway, it so be it. It ended like that. Um,
Yeah. Thanks for rubbing that in. Thanks. Yeah.
well, hey, it was just a fluke it was just a fluke. Um, next, and one of my other favorite movies. Some of your favorite movies. I like to ask that.
Oh, I'm kind of all over the place when it comes
Okay.
to movies. I had a friend that introduced. So I used to have Turner Movie Classics all the time. So I think I have the entire box set of the Thin Man movies here.
Uh-huh.
I have some. I think I have an entire box set of Marx Brothers. Um, but current things. I mean, this past summer we binged all the Fast and Furiouses. You know, um, and all the Marvel movies too, and stuff like
Uh-huh.
that. And yeah, so yeah, nothing in my books is going to be very high literary because
Okay.
I like genres.
Sure.
I
Sure.
same thing with movies, books, or anything. So yeah, I can go for a good old classic Barbara Stanwyck and Fred McMurray something, or I can enjoy Winter Soldier. I'm all over.
Okay. Okay, good. I asked that because I'm an old movie. Because when I wrote this, Vichy Water, I wrote Vichy Water, which changed my whole life around because I watched Casablanca. And at the end of Casablanca, Bogart shoots the German guy, and Claude Rains picks up a bottle of Vichy water, which looks like that.
Yeah,
And he realizes anything in 1942 that had the word Vichy in it meant you were conspiring with the Germans. So it was a bad connotation. And Claude Rains throws it in the garbage. And the second it hits the garbage, I grab my head. I said, "Oh my God!" And that this novel was in my head in 1 second. So so Kessel, but I'm turning classic movies too, constantly. But anyway, kind of winding down. Are you working on anything now?
I am trying to work out a sequel for Murder in the Mirror. I think it has a lot of potential for us. Everybody who reads it tells me, "Oh, you know, it'd be a great series. You can do this
Uh-huh.
and this. You have so many things." So yeah, I'm trying to work that out
Okay,
without telling the same story again of discovery and odd circumstance. So I'm trying to look for a new angle on that. Uh, and then I have a blog. I have my website. I have a couple other areas I write for also. So I always keep myself busy with all of those.
okay. Um, I like this. I like this question. Came from you, not me. How do you define success for a self-published author?
So I think that you basically have to kind of look at that before you actually press that send button or print it. I mean, I've heard of people being big success stories, and some self-publishing companies will tell you those. And a lot of times for me, you know, it's just to be able to go out and meet the people and be part of this community and this group and to have this and to meet people like you. I definitely think you're a very big success story. I mean, you turned just an idea from watching a movie into all of this with the podcast and
Yeah,
everything else.
thank you.
I think the people who honestly who came in and said they just want to tell their story, they did it. Success. Good for you. Uh, but yeah, basically any as long as you meet like your initial like and you can appreciate your what you've done, I think you're success.
Okay. I like that. I like that. Um, and I think I believe a self-published author can become a bestseller, you know, and I guess you believe that too.
It's a very competitive world. I've heard of it too, but I when I publish that, I don't expect that I'll be in like any top 10 list in the newspaper. But if I get some good 5-star reviews on Goodreads or Amazon or someplace, I'm happy.
Great, great. So we've come to the end. This was a such a special time for me to hang with you here. And I'm officially welcome you to come back in panels in any shape, way, form. Next book you write. Hey, I'm hugely loyal. I could write a book about loyalty. Uh, uh, and we're friends, and we were part of that.
I got my copy of your book too. So
Oh, there
yeah,
you go.
me too.
Thank you for that. So we both have each other's copies. Um, so I'm inviting you to come back. This was great, JJ. And you know what? I learned some stuff. I learned some stuff because we are brothers in self-publishing. So come back. I thank you so much. We're going to stop recording now.
Thank
Do you
you.
have any parting comments?
For anybody who's thinking about if you have that story and you want to self-publish, there is a lot of information out there. Unfortunately, yes, it's the internet. There's probably going to be some things you really want to be careful of, but this is doable. This is something that if you want to do it, there are options out there. There are people. There are plenty of videos, plenty of podcasts, video podcasts to help you along. It's not going to be something you're going to do in one day, but it's so rewarding. And so many people. How many people I've name dropped already today, just by
Right,
talking, you know?
right.
And there's so many more I could.
Hey, that's great. So come back. I thank you. I'm going to stop recording and don't leave. This was great, really.
Great, thanks.
Very special. Thank you.